All right, it is 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday, October 11th. I'm not there yet, but perfect timing. We'll officially call this meeting to order. And we're gonna start with our flag salute. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, and indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, so we'll do a quick roll call of board members present. Can we start? Yep.
Jen Bowerjack, District 2.
Dennis Wayne, the representative.
Carly Hoover, Nathan, District 1.
And Morris.
I don't look.
Dave Larson, Egan District 5.
Well, you never introduce yourself. I mean, you
Dr.
can't.
Flipper, superintendent. I will do the roll call up there, just roll right in. Happy to be.
This is weird. All right, and welcome to all of our guests here in person and online. Just grateful that you're spending this time with us this evening. So we'll go to our welcome message and then acknowledgement.
Our agreements are that we stay engaged, experience discomfort, be vulnerable, speak the truth, and expect and accept non-closure. And the land acknowledgement. We in the Tukwila School District acknowledge that the land where we teach, collaborate, learn, and play is the traditional land of the First People of Seattle, the Duwamish and Muckleshoot people past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish and Muckleshoot tribes. As a public school district, we have the responsibility for the stewardship of this land, and we recognize the Duwamish and Muckleshoot people who have been living and working here since the time immemorial.
And just a reminder, which actually I'm not sure, somewhere along the way we lost all the papers that had them on there that were here, but we have a whole packet full of board operating agreements. And I mentioned those because it's really important, I think, to us collectively that we're operating in a way that honors each other and honors the work that we're doing. And so those board agreements are ways in which that we have identified that we're going to engage with each other and the work to make sure that we're being good stewards of it. So I just wanted to name it because we need everybody to ensure that we are doing that and holding ourselves and each other accountable for those. So they're available on the website, and normally there would be paper copies. I'll make sure to get printed for next time, just in case anyone has any interest in looking at those. All right, so we will move to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? All right, the agenda is approved. So now we move to our time for public comments. I know we received no written public comments today. There are, again, a few ways to do public comment. If you are here in person and would like to submit public comment, there is a sign up sheet right there. If you are joining us online, you are welcome to raise your hand or type your name in the chat, and that'll give us an indication that you would like to offer a public comment. So wait just a second. Just in case folks can't find that hand raise function. All right. Okay, well, we will move on then, and just a reminder that there's a public comment opportunity at the end. So as we're moving through, if there are things that are coming up, questions or comments that you have, I encourage you to write those down and then use the opportunity at the end to share those thoughts with us because your feedback is so important to the work that we're doing here. All right, so with that, we'll move to the reports, the race and equity update, and then the COVID-19 update.
Great. Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for being here. So the race and equity reports that I have for this particular board meeting. So last week was the first district-wide race and equity committee meeting of the year. Well attended, each of the buildings were represented. And lots of discussions about the work to be happening this year, which we really good. There's also a lot of questions are geared around some of the professional development that's going on. So last week, we also had professional development starting with the board directors, their first meeting with Doctors Rogers Hard and Canals, who are based out of Oakland, but do a lot of additional race and equity training with the Puget Sound VSD and districts actually around the country. That was on Friday, sorry. Friday, it was a work session on Friday, last Friday. And that was following 2 days of them being in here in Tukwila and working with district administrative teams, also from the building and the central office and all of the buildings, quite honestly. And those happened on Tuesday and Thursday. So there's a little more time that they got to spend with staff. But a lot of that was also mirroring the same kind of work that they were addressing and challenges moving forward with the board. So I can't speak for the board members, but I find them very engaging, extremely knowledgeable, very passionate about the work that they do. And I think the way in which they engage the room and participants is both challenging and inviting at the same time. So I think one of the pieces that really caught my eye was this distinguishing between safe space and brave space. In fact, I talked about it a little bit earlier today in the different meeting that I have. And ultimately, we're trying to create a culture, I think, that values that brave space, because that's where really make the changes. Safe space is great, and that's what I think a lot of people crave. And I think a lot of people need to start in that space. But overall, I'm hoping that the culture of Tukwila really honors and creates a lot of brave space for people. These are extremely challenging conversations for lots of different people for different reasons. And so I'm looking forward to more professional development and engagement in conversations among staff and with them as some of our professional development leads. So they'll be in and out of the district, sometimes in person, sometimes virtually, working with different teams. But I think it's really great and very excited about that. Additionally, for these reports moving forward, I'm going to try and incorporate having some other staff give updates on these. I mean, I don't mind giving them. I think they're great. But I know one of the things the board is wanting to see is more staff get involved. So for next month, I'm going to try and tap someone to come and get some of the updates. So that's what I have on this. For COVID-19, a couple of items. We do have a vaccine clinic coming up this Thursday. However, there's a caveat on this one. This is only for children, individuals under the age of 18. For this particular time, the provider, in order to provide adult vaccinations, they need some access to something different. And so in this particular case, we weren't able to have them provide both. They have in the past, but on this particular occasion, they're not able to provide the vaccinations for over 18. But anybody who would like to get that shot under the age of 18, or parents or community members wanting to bring somebody in, that would be great. We also strongly encourage anybody over the age of 18. If you are seeking that booster shot, to still find that in a location, we can certainly make a reference to someone, and someone's having a hard time locating the space for that to happen. And in the future, we are looking to have all of those available for both adults and children.
And are we talking about all vaccines or just COVID this Thursday?
This one is all, this one is all vaccines.
Cool.
A few other things, just COVID related. So I don't know if you checked out the King County website or dashboard around COVID lately. I check it weekly just to kind of see how things are going. they have really changed what it looks like. It makes it a lot, it makes it a lot more difficult to compare over time. And they don't, they look at, it looks like they're breaking down different parts of regions of a county. So we can't dial all the way into Tukwila, or at least in some of the models that I was looking at. So they just kind of lump Tukwila, SeaTac, Renton kind of together. Before, their website was much more, you know, you could get down to the individual communities. I'm sure they have a reason on why they're making that shift. They do have an Excel spreadsheet that you can download for that, but their dashboard just is a little bit different than what it has been in the past. For us specifically dealing with what we're looking at within Tukwila, our counts are pretty low, thankfully, so we're happy about that. However, we are aware that flu season is coming, so we're gonna keep a sharp eye out for that. And I would just say, you know, even if you don't have COVID and have a flu, you can still wear a mask and not pass along any of those things to anybody else. So I think actually being in that habit of wearing a mask, hopefully will be helpful even in flu season, even if it's not COVID related. So we're hoping that that might continue to help. I have noticed that people do wear masks for several different reasons. As I've had conversations with some people, there's like, oh, I'm wearing a mask because I have to go in for an appointment coming up in the next 3 days and I just don't want to get sick. So I think whatever the reason why someone wants to wear a mask or needs to wear a mask, we continue to honor that. So that's what I have for the COVID-19 updates.
Just one or two quick comments. Just want to highlight, I really value the work that we did at the session that we had on Friday. I mean, I think this was around the race and equity work that we did. I think one of the things that I'm most excited about, besides the ways in which I think it's going to personally, you know, challenge me and us as a board and continue our learning. Aside from that, I think the ways in which like we're going to see this work, like it's happening at every level. And so like what the trainings that we're and the information that we're getting and really grappling with and tackling with is the same stuff from what I understand that is happening at the schools and with the administrators and all at every level. So I think it's going to create just some cohesiveness as far as like how we're talking about the work that we're doing on race and equity. So I'm just really excited about that. And then I know the emergency declaration is coming to an end, right? At the end of this month. And I know we had talked about last time, just if there's anything specific that is worth kind of communicating ahead of time out to families. And then on that note on the masking the flu, it just made me wonder, like, I wonder if there's an interesting educational campaign, small one that we could do, thinking about, I mean, how the flu decreased significantly, or transmission of the flu significantly decreased. And maybe there's like a commercial thing we could do, like, oh, you know, if you're not feeling well, whether it's COVID or not, flu, wear a mask. Because, you know, it helped lower transmission of all different kinds of viruses. Yeah, I don't know, just something. Any other questions, comments, thoughts on either of these two things? Okay, cool. Thank you so much. So we will now move to approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I guess just want to name, normally there would be minutes that we're also approving on this. We don't have those yet because our wonderful minute taker has been on much needed vacation. So those will be, we'll have several chunks of minutes for approval at our next meeting. But if folks are out there and curious what has happened, the recordings are probably available online, even if the minutes are, so you're welcome to find those. Okay, so now we'll move to our board discussion of the Wausau General Assembly prioritization. Dr. Larson.
So the Wausau General Assembly took place at the end of last month, and a bunch of positions were passed and approved and so forth. And so now there's a period where each district can submit their top 10. There are, I forget how many there are, 100 and something possible ones. And
So what I've done here is drafted up what I would propose as the top 10, if you look at the draft TSD priorities one. Just to give a little background, I focus on the ones that are basically funding related, because that is the legislature's primary job. So I want to kind of distinguish, these aren't necessarily the districts as a whole priorities. They're the ones that we want to push with the legislature, and the legislature's primary job, and provides about 80–85% of the money that we get. And so and it's their paramount duty to do this, and they can't leave town without passing a budget and so forth. So I tend to put the funding ones at the top, since that's what's going to have the biggest impact. So there's other things that they can do to kind of help things along, pass laws to require districts to do certain things. Unfortunately, sometimes those end up as unfunded mandates. But anyway, so I've listed 14 of them there that I was considering, in this mix, and the ones in yellow at the bottom, I just quickly go through there and why I kind of, anytime you can only do 10, it's always a process to eliminate them. The McKinney-Vento, that obviously very important to us, but that whole thing that's a needs-based funding thing, which is basically included in the number one of their equity-based K-12 education system. If you read that, it talks about need-based funding. So, to me, that's included in that one. The next one there, attract, recruit, retain high-quality diverse staff. That's one that, frankly, we can do that. It's primarily in our court to do that. It's a hiring thing. I mean, so it's just, it's important. I would put it as a high rank in the district priority, but in terms of the legislature can't necessarily do a whole lot about that particular one. The next one, equity-based education system equity analysis. This would lobby the legislature to try to do an equity analysis on their bills. Again, this one, if we had, is kind of, in my mind, included in the number one. So if we had an equity-based education system, you would get there by doing things that provide that analysis. So that's why I kind of put that one in. The universal preschool meals for us, I mean, we already have that, so I didn't put that one as a super high one for us. So anyway, just give you a background, but I'm willing, we can discuss if there's any others that people saw on the list that we wanted to talk about putting higher up on the list. I'm open to any discussion on that. I think Dennis last time suggested the funding for high poverty schools, so I got that one in there for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. So yeah, I'm glad that was included as well.
That's one that I wrote a number of years ago, so. And we just had a discussion with our, a lot of our social emotional folks, and, it's an obvious need. So this is what I will put in unless there's other suggestions.
So these, the top 10, those are only gonna be for our district specifically?
Yeah, so the way this works is every district will put in their top 10, and then they'll tabulate, who got the most votes. And I'll come back in a few weeks, and I'll what I did last year was, I think it's not clear to me yet whether last year was to then pick the top 20 that came out of that. And those were the ones that they then formulate into their legislative agenda. So they come out with kind of a one-page, here's what we're trying to get the legislature to do. So it's anyway, that's kind of the process. So this is our votes for this thing, and I'll show you, when all the votes are tabulated. Last year, last year was top 15, I think. We're pretty well included in the WASDA ones. I mean, there's a lot of agreement about things, but some of them are controversial. I mean, I'll tell you for a fact that the monthly funding for high poverty schools is very controversial because the wealthy districts don't want to do that. And so far they've been successful at blocking it. But anyway, it's an ongoing battle.
So if the category if it doesn't say funding in the category, is that one of those things that would turn into, as you put it, something, an unfunded mandate?
No, I mean, the unfunded mandate thing, that's kind of how the legislature passes it, I mean, these are just kind of, WASD, it provides guidance to the WASDA lobbyists to say, here's, what we want you to try and push for. And I mean, WASDA is very highly attuned, as you can imagine. Every school district in the state is highly attuned to unfunded mandates. I mean, there is another one somewhere that talks about unfunded mandates, and it kind of goes without saying, because that's something every school district can agree on. Don't do that. And yet the legislature continues to do it because they can get away with it.
They even did that for graduation requirements 15 years ago, and then promptly said, we realized, they passed it saying, we won't implement the graduation requirements until it's fully funded. And about 5 years later, said, we need to do it anyway, even though they're not fully funded.
Yeah, of course.
It is frustrating for lots of districts.
So I think there are two that, I don't think I'd be upset if they didn't end up on this top 10. But I just kind of want to put out there, particularly based on the conversation that we just had. For one of them, the trauma-informed practices and supports for students and staff.
Mhm.
That intrigues me a little bit, which is one of the reasons why I asked the question about the funding, because that's not listed anywhere there. And then the other one that I'm curious around is the multilingual learners. And, I mean, I think you have a much better understanding of like how these would intersect with other things and other, bills that already exist. But I mean, the multilingual learners is, talking about really ensuring that there's equal and equal access to quality public schools in a multilingual setting.
Right.
And I know that, yeah, so that would probably be the other one that I might advocate for.
So the trauma informed practices, that's one that has obviously caught my eye for years. What we've kind of done this time is under this umbrella, if you read the details of equity-based education funding, it's kind of this big umbrella that covers a lot of need-based. So trauma informed, in my mind, is kind of under that. And so that's why I kind of wouldn't, and I think hopefully this equity-based funding will get a high vote by a lot of people, and it covers a lot of areas. So that's kind of, I mean, yeah, the question becomes always on these top tens is which one would you bump? I mean, I completely get trauma-informed practices that we need it.
The idea of kind of like an umbrella one like that, you were just talking about, does that muddy what actual, like, how things could actually be implemented? My guess is that it could, versus having like a more direct, like the trauma-informed practices.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still working on, this, like I said, this, I think goes into a big plot, and then the WASDA board of directors and the people that do the advocacy work, they kind of, look at it and try and pull out, how to, I guess I probably should have brought last year's WASDA sheet of what they do. And I don't think, I mean, calling it out could bring some attention to it more. I'm not sure it would affect how the strategic advocacy, because they would still anything that comes close to that, they will advocate for it. I can guarantee that. So I'm not sure that when you think about how is this going to change how they look at something, which is kind of the ultimate goal of this.
Right.
I'm not sure that it would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Cool. I feel
Okay.
good about those. Go forward.
Okay. I'll put those in, and then, like I said, I'll report back when they tally the vote, and I'll kind of compare how we did or where these came in, and then the final thing. So, thank you.
Thank you so much as always for your work on that. Okay, so now we've got two presentations that were on questions, only presentations, that's halfway right. Student early withdrawal report and 2022 summer school data. So are there any additional questions on either one of these presentations?
I've got something on summer. School.
For the, I don't know who this question should be directed to, but for the, I think that's for Tukwila. There's like a 3-tier systems for communication. What are like the criteria for each of those tiers? I think it's on page 3.
I see. What are the criteria? So in the paragraph, it's just kind of outlining what the different tiers of communication are to students or their families. I'm actually not sure who would be the best person to answer this question.
What's the, what are they?
The early withdrawals,
What's the question?
on,
On page 3. Yeah.
The top, what does it mean by paid tier system?
What are like the criteria for those tiers?
Oh, you're referring to Temple Elementary School. I believe it's the amount of absences that students have had. And also how frequently they've been communicated with. And they're actually kind of revising this as the new principal kind of takes over.
So you don't know if the first tier was 10 absences or 20
No,
absences or.
He didn't, and Ms. Alsop did say that they're looking at it. They're gonna
Yeah.
keep the concept, but they're gonna adjust the tiers.
And for Thorndike, I know that they're developing a system on how to deal with like absences,
Yes.
but like right now, do you know what they're doing about student absences and communication?
The parents will get a phone call if the student is absent during that day, which is standard used by other schools. The other thing that they had kind of like a blind spot or area to grow was the 20-day, thing, where other schools are contacting students, families earlier in the process. New office manager, new office staff, new principal. They're gonna see what the other 2 buildings are doing and kind of all that together to get something that's there.
And do we know when that new system that they're developing might be coming into place?
I think they're working on it now, but I didn't get the definite timeline. They did like what Cascade was doing.
This is probably seem like a very naive question that I should know the answer to.
What's that?
So on page 7, in kind of like the what story is being told here, you mentioned that there are 539 early student withdrawals. And I know that's like by the certain date. So are those folks that have like actually enrolled for that year and then just didn't attend? Or are those folks that, and again, silly question, but do we like, there is an actual enrollment process from year to year to year, right? There's not.
The student is enrolled in.
Then they just stay enrolled.
They just roll.
It carries over. So those 539 are likely folks that we haven't heard from all summer. Maybe there might be a lot of reviews. Okay, but they didn't come and enroll and then are just being withdrawn because they just decided not to show up or move or whatever.
so
Okay,
one correction.
thanks.
There is, if you are an out-of-district student, you do have to
Every
get that
year.
release every year. And if you're a Tukwila resident and you're going to another district, you have to do that every year.
Okay.
So those are 2 things that happen every year.
I think that just that number seems more not as crazy, knowing that like those are folks that we had contact with in that year. I think that was one of the things that I was thinking about. And then one of the questions I asked around the re-enrollment after 20 consecutive days.
Yeah.
The answer is that it's not difficult to re-enroll, but what is that process? Do they have to refill out paperwork or they just kind of?
So oftentimes, a teacher will hear about a student, taking a trip possibly to their homeland for a period of time longer than 20 days. Teacher encourages the parents to go to the office principal and let them know what's happening. At that point, they determine when the student, if they're gonna be there for 2 months, they'll say, oh, we're gonna withdraw you on this day, and when you come back, we'll re-enroll you, and they make a note of when the student will return. Sometimes that gets pushed back a little further, sometimes it, it's a little shorter. But in most cases, the office staff is aware that the student is just gone for a period of time, and they know that they're coming back. Obviously, folks that move, it's a little different. Because the conversation is we're moving, we're not coming.
Right.
But in talking with the office managers, did really good communication. It sounded with the families on these particular cases. And Cascade View has I think, probably the most diverse population. And so I remember a lot of students going back to over the summer or in the fall, different times of the year to their homework.
Does that have any, I guess, what impact does that have on the student and their, I mean, obviously there's, the missed time, but that piece aside, does it have a larger impact on like their ability to graduate, like credits? Like, how might that impact a student's trajectory?
I guess it would depend on how long they were gone.
Okay.
And what their current academic standing was when they left. That's a difficult question to answer
Sure.
because there's so many variables in that. I don't think it prohibits them from graduating or earning credit in courses. Again, they probably should have a conversation with their teacher, say, hey, I'm going to be gone for this period of time. Maybe get something to work on, stay in contact if possible, Google Classroom, those kind of strategies could be employed.
And so I know that, students sign up the year before for classes and then they're enrolled in the classes like a few months before. So if, say, they're enrolled in these classes and 4 days in or 20 days in, they get dropped from the school, would it count on their transcript as a dropped or a fail? And then if they re-enroll, what would it be like shown as,
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I don't know the answer to that, but that's a really good question. If they leave. and they're
Well,
not-
it would depend on if they started at all. So if it's the beginning of the school year and they didn't start, it wouldn't be, I don't think it's a fail because the students or the staff are going through saying, this person's put a lot here. They haven't turned in any work. It's not counted against them. But to the earlier point, if that's a class that they need credit for and they have missed a certain amount, we want to make sure that they're able to make up that credit. If they're not able to, or they're starting kind of far enough behind. But the other issue comes around like space. So if it's a really overfilled class and that student had it like, oh, I got the class I wanted, but there's maybe other students who want to get in there. If the student gets dropped, it's possible that someone can take that spot and then they might kind of lose that spot in the class if they've been dropped for home. If they don't know like what the reason is, but again, if they're traveling someplace and everybody knows, then it's like you can't hold that spot. Figure out how to get the work to the 4.8.
So like my question more is on like the transcript and how to do it. Because I was wondering if they get dropped from the school, it will show that on the transcript and it might like negatively impact them if they apply to like colleges or other schools and things like that.
We can look at that. I don't know right offhand what it looks like on the transcript, but we can follow up with that.
I happen to know why there's so many unknowns at Tupelo Elementary. Is that kind of in process? or-
Right, well, my thoughts are, when I looked at the spreadsheet of all the reasons, there
Yeah.
were a lot of gaps.
Hmm.
Depending on the different schools, so that I believe there's inconsistency in the inputting of the data. That would be my guess.
Oh, like they probably knew, but they just didn't fill it in.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
And teaching and learning and doing some professional development with our office staff with Skyward. So,
Is there something we need a policy about with a standardized procedure?
I don't know if it's a procedure. I think it's just more how we do things.
Okay.
And just following, protocols and getting everyone in the room. And let's do it this way. It's what Skyward's insisted.
Okay.
Expectations. But
Yeah. Thank you.
okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so the summer school, first of all, I was interested that, you know, so originally this analysis was done with including all the students who had quote rushed through.
Yes.
Which means, to me, I guess they're likely just punch the same. Are these, is this is entirely a multiple choice, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's good, it's multiple choice and it's in English, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So it was interesting that when the rush scores got taken out, the total scores actually ended up higher.
Yep.
Which, you know, that's kind of a head scratcher because, I mean, what that's a question is the validity of the test. If somebody can kind of do just as well by randomly picking answers, I don't know, does that, is there any,
So you did mention that if we, when we took the rush students out,
Yeah.
the percentages went up in terms of like better scores.
yeah,
Which would be correct, because we're just like pushing the button and they're getting it wrong.
no. If you take, when you take the rush scores out, if you include the rush scores, that's better than when you're taking the rush scores out.
Oh.
It's the other way around in a couple of cases.
In a couple of cases, I'd have to look a little bit deeper.
Okay, yeah, that just kind of,
That's strange.
yeah, that,
That's very strange.
although, well, yeah. I guess, first of all, including when I saw the rush scores were included, to me, that's not gonna be a valid, I mean, including them is not valid. I mean, the only information you get, if you have a rush score, that's a flag from the student saying I'm disengaged from this test, and so it's not gonna really measure anything, so just put it off to the side and say, let's check in with those students and find out, you know, why they did that, and then figure that out. So it seems like it's a better thing to do, just without the rush scores. The second thing, so the story that was attempting to be told here was, so this is, you know, essentially looking at summer school and saying, you know, did summer school essentially do any good for students academically?
Right.
And the way that it was originally, or it's laid out here, is you're looking at the percentage of students that are in these different grade level categories. Now, in order to, you know, this is 4 weeks. So in order to show that, you know, they did better, a student have to jump a grade level. And
Well,
because, I mean, that's because all you're doing is the number of students or the percentage of students in each of these grade levels. And it seems to me that it's generally going to be unlikely that anybody's in 4 weeks going to, now, if they're at the very, if they happen to be a scale score at the very top of, and they bump.
Yeah.
But, so it seems like that particular way of, and so the conclusion was kind of, well, there really wasn't much improvement in the scores, and that doesn't strike me as a valid way to measure summer school, because you're not going to get, you know, I mean, people aren't going to go in 4 weeks, they're going to jump a grade level. So the question is there a better way, you know, so that's why I think, you know, I was kind of saying we should be using student growth levels. And the question, and so I asked, well, why don't we use the, you know, the typical growth and so forth that are in, and because, you know, I mean, these growth measures are just, you know, student at point A, student at point B. Now, recognizing in summer school, the point A and point B is spring, you know, the last test in the spring, and then the test at the end of summer school. But those are, I mean, the last test in spring is what, April typically? So then you're talking about May, June, July. So, I mean, there's about 3 months. So it seems like, which is the same as, I mean, we have, you know, the iReady tests in October, and then I think January, and then April.
Yeah.
So the question is, why can't we just use the iReady typical growth and stretch growth, because to look at, you know, as the growth measures instead of, you know, this kind of,
I think the metrics, so are you saying like go back to like the spring, the spring, target. and
Right, which is
parent
what,
growth,
which is what,
and then-
which is what she did here.
Right.
But she did it by looking at these different bands, you know, rather than. You know, how many were there, what percentage were there in the mid or above grade level and early grade, the 5 different bands of proficiency instead of using the growth measures. And if you just use the 5 bands of proficiency, you're not going to see much because, you know, almost nobody's going to grow 1 grade level in 4 weeks. But I mean, I can remember, I think it was, Aaron, you may remember a long time ago, when you did summer school 1 year, we saw some like, you know, half a grade level growth in some places, which is really good.
Yeah.
For summer school.
Yeah.
And so that's, you know, that's the measure. I mean, we need to be using a student growth measure to decide whether summer school. I mean, I recognize that, of course, summer school, it's not just about academics, but it's a significant part of it. And we need to be measuring, you know, whether, you know, what we're doing is working or not working. And so I think there's a better measure that could be used. I mean, Shelby said, well, you know, you can't do that. Well, I think you can. I guess it's bottom line.
You could use points, right? Because these points
Scale
translate.
score,
Yeah,
yeah.
scale score,
Scale score.
point to, you know,
Yeah.
point to these different.
Yeah,
the-
yeah,
the 5
yeah,
areas on the
yeah.
graph, so you could, that would be a manner that you could do.
Right, and because this level is 2 course, to use a grade level in the 4-week period, that's 2 course. We need you know, scale score is much more finely
Yeah,
grained.
I agree.
And so seems to me that's how we should be. I don't want to make a conclusion here that, well, summer school, you know, didn't do any good because, you know, this measure. I mean, maybe it didn't, but I need to see a student growth level measure to determine that. And then I can remember from the year, you know, a long time ago when Aaron was doing it, that there was some classes that really had some really great growth and there were some classes that didn't. And then we need to do the analysis. Okay, what happened in the ones with great growth? What happened in the ones that didn't see the growth? And so that's how we can, you know, because for example, one of the things, you know, I went on the tour with Michael and people were talking about Math for Love, this program, new program they're trying. I'm not sure how that got in the district, but it came in for summer school. And did it work? Did it do anything? I mean, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, that's important to know because we need to know whether it's, you know, something we should do. Was it maybe didn't do anything? It just wasn't implemented with fidelity. I mean, you know, there's a variety of different
right.
ways to look at that, but we definitely need to know, have the right tool to be looking at this. And I don't know, I guess you and I are going to sit down with Shelby on Thursday, and maybe this is one we can discuss as well.
Around a little bit.
Yeah, so anyway, because I think it's important to get the right measures here for summer when we're evaluating summer school and figure out what we're doing. The other that I wasn't aware of, and I guess this has been going on for a while, but it looks like the vast majority of students going to summer school are either special education or MLL, ELL, which I guess is not too surprising, but I just think it's important to understand when we're looking at numbers, it's important to understand who's being served here. So, you know, anyway, that was this kind of discovery for me. It's like 40% were I mean, significantly more, 30% of the students were special ed students, which is, you know, 2 times, you know, what our normal population is. So, because that may drive, you know, what we learn from this, you know, may apply particularly to special education students, if that who is primarily taking this. So anyway, I just think those are important things to look at when we're kind of evaluating these numbers. So
Sure.
anyway, yeah, we can talk more about that on Thursday. I just don't want us to come away with necessarily from this, well, summer school doesn't really do any good
Right.
academically,
Right.
because I sure hope it does.
Yeah, me too. I
Okay,
mean, she kind of used the same process as last year. So I hear what you're saying about,
Okay.
about the scale score.
okay, yeah, because I'd definitely be interested in looking into that. Okay.
So, and originally wasn't summer school longer than 4 weeks?
It's been 4 weeks for a while, I think, doesn't it? I don't know.
Maybe for a while, but it used to be.
Last year was 5, this year 4.
Okay, so there's another,
And then I think it was 6 weeks before that, yeah.
yeah, so that's good to know too, because, okay, maybe 4 weeks is not enough, and maybe we need to really focus on 6, so.
How, I've probably asked this before and it still hasn't sunk in. On the iReady, how do we take into account their the students' English language, grasp of English language? I could see that would be why kids would rush. If they don't understand a word on the screen, all they're gonna do is click a letter.
Right.
And I know if we look at placement by MLL, but that still doesn't tell us their level of English proficiency to be able to take the test, right?
Right, you have to look at their WIDA score, to find out what their level of proficiency is with the, English language.
And we don't compare that at all, because maybe that explains more.
Oh, I'm sure it does. I'm sure it shows up in the results for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've had conversations with teachers about that, and, you know, the MLL students typically, you know, they'll come in if they know very little. And this iReady would not be able to pick up anything. I mean, it's just noise, because they would just do that, or they wouldn't get anything. And
But on
so
the math, they might be able to do.
maybe, yeah,
Because-
exactly.
yeah.
And then, but then typically in their growth, at some point, they hit some kind of critical mass, and then you started to see their growth being picked up. So I think that's a valid question. Is iReady, is that, you know, that's why I kind of want to see, you know, MLL separated, because is iReady necessarily a valid measure of that? It's not going to pick up some of those really, you know, when they're at the very beginning. And I think we need to understand that and, you know, kind of call that out and say, okay, that's where they are. Now, some of the students who've gotten to a critical mass level, it could be valid for them.
Yeah.
So that's why I just think you have to be careful when we're looking at these tests to understand kind of what's going on
So we
behind.
could pull those numbers out that score at a certain place on the WIDA. So you
Yes, yeah,
We
Yeah,
could pull those out of our iReady scores and
Yeah.
see how our English
right.
language. More
You could do
proficient
that for
speakers.
sure, yeah.
Right,
The other quick piece is that when students go to intervention, there's data gathered there on a smaller, that would show smaller spaces of growth with a different assessment. They're assessed every week to track their progress. And so once they get to a certain point, Director Larson's right, they start to show up on the iReady after this inspection.
And iReady is not available in other languages.
Spanish.
It is available. Do we use that?
I've had some asks. That's something that Dr. Borishay and I would talk about, what that would look like.
yeah, that would be an interesting thing to do.
What would be the reasons why we wouldn't offer it in Spanish?
I guess because the standardized tests aren't given in Spanish, they're in English, and to gauge where a student is in terms of the standards. You would want them to, you know, the English language standards, the math standards, those are typically formed or created for English speakers in this country.
But it
That's
might
one
pick
thing to
up,
look for.
yeah, it might pick up for a student that maybe understood math really well in Spanish. It would pick up that knowledge that,
Right.
okay, this is a student that really, they get math, they just need, they're working on their English,
Right.
fine. And so don't,
It's
yeah,
not a total
don't have
bad
it,
idea. It's not a
don't have it,
total
yeah.
bad
don't have it be zero in math.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea at all, particularly if we're thinking about like how we can really decenter English, right? And I know that like. If we look at our, you know, our whole larger system, like that's gonna take a long way to move, but we can move that into Willa. And if there are some tools that are accessible to do that. And if it really is about them mastering the core competency. That should be true regardless of the language that they're doing it in, right? It's about the competency. Not.
As
Right?
long as it's verbal, but if it's in a written language, are they going to be able to read Spanish?
Well, if it's in their language, is what I mean. Then that would actually,
It would be more known that they understand
The concept.
the content and the language is the issue. So it would still be an issue if they were to take the SBA, but we would know that they understand the content and if language is the issue.
It's also a matter of self-esteem too, because if a student does well on a test, you know,
But something for sure, and I think as we have in the summer school piece, like we're reevaluating examining kind of what the role of summer schools is going to look like for, you know, how it can support students.
Once
Yes,
again,
see
it's-
its effectiveness.
It's bigger than academics.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Which actually kind of brings me to probably not a question or a comment on the AHA Learning Report. What I gather from that is we will likely not be using AHA Learning again, I think, based on, maybe not. But there are just 2 points in the implication section that I just kind of wanted to bring some awareness to that I feel like is not in alignment with, one, what the board I think has been pushing, and 2, really an understanding of what those partners do. So the fact that we're asking our out of school time providers to be competent in iReady, to do professional development around the iReady, I think is asking them to, and then to like actually them be responsible for helping move iReady scores. I think that's a misuse of their expertise, right? They're there really to, I mean, out of school time providers are so much about how we're creating, really focusing on those social emotional things, right? That will ultimately in turn, hopefully impact scores. But I really worry that we're muddying the waters and we're taking away their ability to really infuse their expertise into our schools and work with our young people by putting our own criteria on what we think they should do. So just a comment, I don't particularly think that should be in their contracts as an out-of-school time provider. So. Yeah, you can jump in.
I guess the nuance is if you call yourself a tutor, then the association of you being a tutor is associated to academic.
Sure, champions, do they label themselves as a tutor?
They said they will address the academics. They will put students on, they will work with them on their academic goals.
But they're not a tutor, right? And they would never describe themselves as a tutor. So champions is a before and after school program, right? They're out of school time space where most out of school time providers have a time where they can support young people with homework, right? But they are not experts in academic supports. They are experts in out of school time, which is a whole other world of really amazing work with youth. So I totally understand about AHA Learning. They are a tutoring group. I agree, right? They should, and I think that makes sense within their contract. But where I really want to push back is including that in the out of school time providers contracts. Because again, I think it really takes away from the value that they add with the expertise that they bring as a field.
I think that's something that we would need to make sure parents understand, because parents may be thinking that there will be some time that you work on schoolwork in the after school as well as other things. So I just think we just need to be really clear about the message that we're sending,
For sure.
if that's going to be the case.
Yeah, and I think part of that is on the provider as well, right? I mean, so I've worked in out of school spaces for a long time. And one of the biggest challenges that I had is, we didn't prioritize homework time. We had it, it was there. And so the conversation that I had on repeat with parents all the time is, you know what? We're here really to engage our young people in hands-on learning activities, not necessarily to help to make sure they finish their homework. Will we provide a place where we can support with that? For sure, but this is what we do. This is not what we do. And so, yeah, I think you're right. And that also falls on the provider themselves. But what I just worry about is when we're adding that into contracts, it's gonna limit what providers are really able to do. And again, in their expertise, right? The out of school time field is a really amazing field that is doing really, really incredible work that isn't focused on academics. It supports academics, usually through other means, more mastery-based learning, more like small group processing, and less focused on data and test scores. So yeah, I hear you. I think that's a two-way, stream of communication.
Yeah, I think it'll be really important to make sure parents, I mean, we've now got you know, what I call almost an embarrassment of riches, and we have a lot of after-school programs going on now. And so parents, as they're selecting them for their students, need to understand what each one is doing. And then, you know, we need, our offerings need to kind of be driven to some degree by what the parents want to do.
Any other questions, comments on summer school?
I know that recently, I don't know if it's recent or it's like. Has been going on for a long time, but we hire some new teachers who help support like. Language learning in the classroom for like, you know, to help teachers know how to teach students that are multilingual. Yeah, yeah. So is that new or has it been there for a long time?
That one is new for right now, but we don't have that. We haven't had that for some.
Yeah, so I was gonna say that if it would be good to potentially implement those teachers into summer school next year.
Oh.
And, you know, because, you know, like almost half of our students during summer school are ELL or MLL students, so it would support a pretty good population of
So
students.
the coaching concept.
Yeah.
Great idea. Just have to make sure that they are available and want to extend their year.
I noticed earlier that Sam, our senior student rep, had his hand up. I'm not sure if there's anything that you'd like to add, Sam. I think you are able to unmute.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, I agree with Dennis with like the idea of incorporating thing. And I was wondering, uh, do we still offer after school programs at our elementary schools, right? That like help support our students like with homework help and like anything that they need, right?
I don't know about anything that they need.
I mean like support with like homework help as well as like, yeah, like homework help as well as like activities after school. Cause I remember when I was in elementary, they had an after school program and they were really helpful for me personally back when I was in elementary. That's what I meant.
So, yeah, I mean, I've been working in an after-school program at Cascade View, and so since Cascade View has robotics, they have Disney musical, they have athletic programs, they've got champions, they've, I don't know.
Yes, we have a variety of options for students after school at the elementary.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And in fact, students are having trouble deciding between them. I mean, in robotics, we're sharing when they come in Mondays and then the other day they go to another program. And so I said embarrassment of riches is it's great
Okay.
that we have so many. I don't know the other elementaries, probably similar.
I know, one of the things that, so there's the after school like enrichment programs, some of those things that you were talking about, and then there's like before and after school programming, which I think, you know, are different things slightly, right? Or like an after school program can support with enrichment type activities. And at the same time, they're more there to provide a different type of structure, right? Where then, you know, they can come to that after school program and then self-select to go to the robotics and come back to the after school program. I say all that to say, and I talked to Dr. Hernan about this, we're utilizing 21st century funding to bring in those after school programs, which is wonderful. And at the same time, it actually limits the amount of spaces that are available in those after school programs. And so the spaces that are licensed in our schools are actually licensed for upwards of 60 kids, but we're only actually serving 20 in each school or 25-ish with through that 21st century grant. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to increase capacity. And I think, yeah, so they're there, but they're not really serving all of the youth that I think need it throughout our district. More opportunity, particularly around the after school.
Do you have an idea of why it's not being more utilized?
Because it's the way that we're funding it right now, we're funding it through the, and I'm correct, please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're funding it through 21st Century, the grant. So that means we are paying the district a certain amount of slots. And I believe it's again between 20 and 40 at each school.
Which program are you talking about?
Champions,
Oh, Champion.
yeah.
Definitely a topic we can bring up in the future, since it's not on the agenda. currently.
Is Champions, where is Champion located, like which?
Each elementary.
Each elementary, okay. And at the end of the day, do they get those bus rides back home?
Mhm.
No, we don't have transportation.
Because that might be one of the problems, potentially why if the kids, they can't really stay, or, you know, their parents don't come up at certain times.
Yeah, I think the issue right now is not that there's not a moment, is that they're full. There's no spots.
The provider.
Yes. Oh. Yeah, based on our funding,
Based
but
on-
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I think we definitely added it as a gen, I mean, it's, you know, somewhat relevant because it was on here and Champions was related to summer school, so that's why it came up.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, for the after school, I mean, we got 148,000 from the state for after school programs. 1 year only, unfortunately, but
We did?
Yeah.
How do we spend that?
It's for this year.
for this year.
How are we spending it? Okay, never mind, that's another.
That's the next agenda.
Okay.
The other question related to that is how many students are actually enrolled in after school programs district-wide, which I know. Representative Berquist, who got the 148,000 for his system, will ask me next time I see him.
Any other questions on summer schools? It's hard to talk about other things, everything's so intertwined and interconnected. Okay, so we'll move to our action items, I'm sorry, 2 action items for approval. The first one is approval of the human resources staffing report.
Second,
Any questions, comments? All in favor of approving? All right, stands approved. And then second is the approval of out-of-state travel. Motion.
so
Okay, any discussion or questions?
Well, I'm just wondering if the new person that will be coming on, will be able to attend that class.
Possibly.
Probably depends on timing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Goal would be yes, but likely not. depending. Yeah. Too much up in the air, for sure. Thanks for listening out the team, that'd be going. Okay, all in favor of approving this? Okay, that brings us to our second opportunity for public comments. So if you are joining us virtually and would like to offer public comment, please use the raise hand function or type your name in the chat. Okay, seeing no hands raised and nothing in the chat, I'll assume there's no public comment. So which means we are going to move into executive session. And this executive session is to review the performance of a public employee for RCW 42.30.140G. I am going to throw out 45 minutes for this executive session. Does that feel okay? So that would bring us back at 8:20, 8:15. That's wrong still. Close enough. 8:20, I think. Yeah, so if I don't see you again, thank you so much for being here. Yeah. I assume Dennis does not stay for that section.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, oh, I was at the. On the list of members, that's why we need there, but. The human.
We can.
Human resources. I'm about like,
So,
Or-
the question is, I read it as reading,
Stacy Hampton.
And
but if they're reading it,
Oh, you
and
were
we give it to
human
them in
resources?
Spanish,
Human resources, yeah.
Oh,
you,
Yeah.
when was
do
this?
primary.
Oh, she
source
can,
in
she can
Spanish.
do,
It's what it asks,
our-
what it
yeah,
means.
they kind of like, I think that's on. Case by case.
Yeah.
So now,
Oh,
maybe.
Okay.
There's my name.
Yep, I'm on there.
Coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where we.
Need to identify
provided
the
more,
student, is a student.
you know, for the city.
Right.
agencies,
Reading,
And
Yeah.
case.
that's where some of. the
Yeah, that was my
agencies that we
question.
use In our schools. Get funded from the city too, and that's why I did a double check.
Yeah.
Are they